Hello again, everyone. It's Mr. Most Days Off, here to welcome you back to the best darn diddly review show. We're going back to 1990 again for another double shot of Simpsons classics. Today we've got Life on the Fast Lane and Homer's Night Out. As usual, I'm not going to do this alone. I've got for you once again your co-host with the most, Richie the WizKid. How are you today, Rich?
I am very excited today. We have a third special guest with us, and I think it's very fitting for these two episodes. So I can't wait to hear what kind of conversation pops up between us. But I'll let you introduce that third person. I'll go ahead and throw it back to you. The man, the myth, the Montgomery Burns, who may or may not be excellent. It is Miles.
All right, as Richie said, we do have a very special guest. I would say the best guest, and that's not just because I love blowjobs. Let me introduce to you my lovely wife, Emily.
Hey guys, I'm excited to be here on my first ever podcast. So when your ratings spike, you're welcome.
Awesome. We're really glad to have you. Before we get started with the show, how about you take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your relationship with The Simpsons.
Well, I have 30-year-old confidence, and I am the reason there is a Mr. Most Days Off. Otherwise, he'd be Mr. Jewelry Salesman.
True.
And I've known these two guys for going on 10 years now, so lucky you. My relationship with The Simpsons goes back to growing up in Germany. It was one of the only shows that I would watch in English as a kid. So despite it not necessarily being a child's program, I sure love The Simpsons because it was in English. So I've, like I said, been watching that for, cripe guys, it's been on like 20-something years at this point.
Yeah, we're actually coming up on season 28 this month.
Oh man, we're old.
So you're saying if you would have been born like 6 years later, then your favorite show would probably be SpongeBob?
Don't put that out there in the universe. That's a horrible thing to say to someone.
Well, that would be like the only show that would pop up in English over there, I think, wouldn't it?
Dude, SpongeBob is the show that killed Nickelodeon, so like I fucking hate that sponge. I really do. It's like the longest running Nick show now, though. So I mean, it was, on one hand, it was like a massive commercial success for Nickelodeon, but it absolutely gutted anything that would ever be creative from that studio again. But that's for a whole different podcast. Let me not get on too many soapboxes this early in the show. How about we get into this first episode? The first episode we watched today is all the way from March 18th, 1990. It's Life on the Fast Lane. This is another episode that was pretty long, so they had a very, very short opening credits, and they had no chalkboard scene and no couch gag. We got right into the show. This show is the first appearance. In a very brief moment, we see Lenny for the first time. And in a pretty funny scene, we see Helen Lovejoy, the Reverend's wife, for the first time. Also, the first appearance of Barney's Bolorama, even though that was mentioned in a previous episode. So, this episode kicks off with it's Marge's birthday. And the kids are preparing her breakfast in bed, and they surprise the parents in bed. Marge is super happy.
Let's clarify, they're making a giant mess for her to clean up later on her birthday.
Happy birthday!
That results in food.
But it's a sweet thought. But you're totally right. That's the fucking worst thing that kids can do for their parents. It's like, it seems so cool on TV, and then all it is just like, fuck, now I've got like 100 dishes to do.
You know what Mom wants for breakfast in bed? Cereal and no one at her house. That's what she wants. Leave.
Well, you know Homer ain't cleaning that up.
Yeah, no kidding.
To be fair, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but so Homer's about to have a massive blunder at the beginning of this episode, but then we're going to get to a point where I think Homer shows like he's like the best father he ever has been on this show for a while.
For like when 6 minutes out of 28 years.
But it was a really strong 6 minutes.
He's had some strong moments.
This was an early sign of him showing that he really is a good father. Despite some of the issues going on with him and Marge. But before we get into that, it's Marge's birthday, and the dim-witted Homer, of course, forgot.
Classic sitcom staple, by the way.
Thinks it's his birthday when the kids show up with food for him.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking asinine. He's kind of a dick there.
It's my birthday! Aw, douche.
But tries to pull it off that he did not forget when he totally did, and he rushes to the mall to find Marge a present. There was a pretty funny couple of moments here where Homer's walking by some stores that just would not exist anywhere, but one that really dated this in the 90s. There was an actual answering machine store.
It's like International House of Answering Machines or something like that.
That's what it's called.
Which just cracked me up because this is probably getting close to, the answering machine wasn't alive for too much longer after this. It's got less than a decade to live at this point.
I may or may not have had an answering machine when we were in high school.
We did.
Okay, so like a decade and a half, whatever. It still fucking dates the show. Who cares? It made me laugh that it was a thing that existed. It would confuse the hell out of millennials.
You know what I loved about the mall, and since we all been in the mall atmosphere for a long time, especially Mr. Most Days Off and myself, is before the mall opened, all those old people walking around outside the mall.
Like The Walking Dead, but like
I
for
felt
real.
like I was having flashbacks, like going back to war or something.
That's totally a thing that's really weird and totally happens. But it makes sense. It's a nice air-conditioned environment for old folk to get some exercise. But yeah, there's like...
Or red-haired people that don't want sunburns in the heat.
Yeah, that's true. You know what? The malls have been keeping gingers safe for way too long. We should really bring this awareness to society.
I don't want to scare you, but I'm really 62, and I've just stayed out of the sun this whole time.
If you're not a day walker, then you shouldn't go outside anyways. Stop stealing souls.
It's easier to do that inside. Jeez. People can't get away.
So Homer's mall trip is pretty unsuccessful in terms of finding a present for Marge, but what he does find is a shiny new bowling ball that he decides to get fit to his hand and engraved with his name, but then still gift wraps it for Marge, which the whole concept here is he was trying to give her something that she wouldn't use so that he could end up having it, which is super fucked up and greedy, and is kind of the catalyst for what this episode is really about.
Can we back up and clarify that per Marge's conversation with her sisters, this is a reoccurring theme in their family? Every year he gets Marge something that he wants.
Very good point. That was kind of the way that the episode told us how what was going on. Is Patty and Selma, who openly hate Homer, were mentioning that that's a common characteristic of Marge. It's absolutely on the spot.
And then she defends him.
Well, I think you're trying to say that it's actually Marge's fault then that this happens, because if it's a reoccurring theme, why hasn't it been handled already? I mean, you're not supposed to put the blame on the victim, but Jesus Christ, say something.
She goes, Richie, God, I know what you're supposed to interpret from.
You should see this coming from a mile
constantly.
away if it's already happened numerous times.
Ugh.
I feel like we may have just stumbled onto something scientific here. Apparently, the difference between the married and unmarried is the unmarried do not understand the infinite number of words that can be said with a short growl.
Yeah. She growled the candle out, might I remind you.
Yeah, that actually really made me laugh. She did her classic grunt in the camera. The candle
The
just
only
goes
remaining
like,
candle after he smashes her birthday cake with this stupid gift that is for him anyway.
Okay, but to be fair on that part, I don't know. I blame the box integrity more than I blame Homer on that. But yeah, still totally icing on the cake of his terrible mistakes.
Don't worry, it'll come right off. Don't worry.
Yeah, this is by far one of the worst things Homer ever does throughout the series, in my opinion.
Oh, I don't know about that. Oh boy.
Yeah, there's a lot, but this ties into last week when we had our guest Dr. Andrew Briseño on talking about how there's a lot of things that just make you question why in the hell is Marge with Homer, especially when we learn later when Marge was in college, she was pretty much a fox.
And smart, wasn't she?
Well, she was a feminist, so she couldn't have been that smart.
She did burn her bra. That was
God.
a quick, stupid decision.
Seriously, you know how expensive bras are. I've been bra shopping with you. That shit is expensive. Do not fucking light that shit on fire for protest. I'm not going to light my PlayStation 4 on fire for protest for any reason.
To get back what you were talking about Homer and Marge, about why they're still together,
She's had a
I've actually
lobotomy.
thought about this for the last week, and it plays into our guest last week, Andy. He was talking about how Maggie is actually a witch.
She's keeping her parents together?
Yeah, it's like the Dursleys. Like, that's the issue right here, is that they actually have to stay there to protect Maggie. Like, it makes perfect sense.
That's really cool, and I love Harry Potter, but I do like to think that, and we see this a little bit more, there really is just a strong bond between Marge and Homer, and they're able just to overcome the buffoonery.
Oh, there absolutely is.
It's Stockholm Syndrome or something. There's no rational explanation.
To be fair, Marge does put up with a lot more than Homer does, though in this episode, I have to say, Marge was kind of shitty. Again, it started with Homer's fault, of course, but Marge really pushes the lines of what's acceptable extramarital relation. Like, I have no issue with her having a male bowling coach, but like,
Well, I mean, if she wants to learn, she does need a man to help her. So obviously,
of course, you need someone to mansplain it to
Yeah.
her. I mean, that's logic. But let's get to that in a second. But I do want to catch up on this episode. So Marge decides that the best thing she can do is actually take the gift and use it. She is going to leave Homer to take care of the kids, and she's going to go to the bowling alley, and she's going to have a damn good time. And I think that's totally fair up to this point.
That's more
Here's
than
this
fair. What are you
present I
talking
didn't want you to
about?
have. Okay, fine, you're gonna watch the kids, and I'm gonna use it. So F you, dude.
I think that absolutely, that should be an implied part of the gift if it was really meant for her, and I think we all know it wasn't, but if he's going to try to pretend, he's got to go all the way with it, bottom line. So she goes to Barney's Bolorama, and there's actually a really funny moment here where we find out that Marge Simpson predates Peggy Hill as a large-footed animated woman.
Yeah, 13 double A.
13 double A, and unfortunately all the bowling alley can offer is 1/9 and 1/15. Or I think it was 9.5 and 15, but that part made me laugh. And also, why does the bowling alley need a sign that says if you can't bowl without a lane?
Because it sets up the joke because she was about
Just
to
for
throw it
that
down
gag.
the side of the bowling alley.
She said she didn't need a lane.
It
She
just made me
needed to
laugh
bowl.
that apparently there was enough people that thought that they could bowl without a lane that the bowling alley decided that they needed a sign for it.
Well, why do McDonald's coffee say
Don't
warning
even get
hot
me
coffee
started.
on there?
There's a documentary about it.
It's because they need that on there. So clearly,
Dude, that's actually a really fucked up
It's so
documentary where they
upsetting.
basically just like mauled this poor woman and then like flipped the story around.
Like if she was some greedy old monster, and she's like, you burned all her friggin' vajayjay skin off, and she just needed skin graft money because she's old.
It's super fucked up. Man, wish I could remember what that
Hot
movie was
Coffee.
called. Hot Coffee. There you go. That's why I've got a wife, ladies
You're
and gentlemen.
welcome.
Oh, what a perfect name.
So, Marge gets on her lane, finds out she can't bowl, and there's a man next to her who seems to have a lot of attention and to be quite the bowler, and he's French.
Oui.
And he makes a approach to Marge where he offers to be her bowling coach, but he pretty early on is fairly romantically interested in her and doesn't exactly hide that. But something that I thought was pretty interesting. We talked about how this had a shorter intro sequence because of how long it was. Al Brooks provided the voice of Jock, and he did over 3 hours.
Jacques with a zh, not J. It's not Sporty Spice.
Whatever the fuck his name
Jacques is his
Al
name.
Brooks played him, and he provided over 3 hours of improvised lines for this character. And that was one of the reasons that the show ran so long, is because they had a really hard time cutting it down, because he just went with this character and ran with it and had a lot of really funny parts.
He really did. Some of my favorite lines were some of his quotes from this one.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a few things that came about from him that were quite funny.
I'm going to start incorporating laugh out loud, you'll lose weight into everyday conversation, because I about fell off the couch on that one.
I do want to say, though, this is the scene where I feel Marge really starts her biggest transgression, and that is when Jacques, with a
There you go.
instead of a J sound,
Sounds smarter already.
when Jacques mistakenly calls Marge Homer, because that's the name on the ball, Marge starts to say that Homer is her husband, but then she pauses and says that that's her ball's name. And I'm just saying, ladies, if you do that, you are opening the door for predatory douchebags to hit on you like crazy. And once you've done that, you can't claim innocence anymore. Just saying.
I honestly disagree with you a little bit on that. I don't think that was her not wanting to admit she was married because of the other guy. I think that was her still being mad at Homer, so she didn't want to recognize him in that, and she, with her anger and frustration, just metaphorically at the moment, he is dead to her. So no, it's just the name of my
Doesn't
ball.
surprise me from the guy who dates married chicks.
I gotta side somewhat with Richie on this one, and I don't date married chicks. I think Marge is still frustrated and resentful, but if we're playing into the reality where Homer got that present for her, that's her ball, and the name Homer's on it, so clearly the ball's name is Homer.
I personally think you can tell there's a moment where she considers saying husband and then says ball. And you can also see that Jacques gets he instantly goes into predator mode when he notices
No
this.
ring.
Exactly. But this did lead to another funny moment with the ball misconfusion where Jacques starts to offer Marge lessons and Marge says, "No thank you, Mr. Brunswick."
Which his name is on the ball. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jacques offers Marge bowling lessons and includes things that he can teach her, such as what the arrows mean, which frame is the beer frame, and how to make a 5, 7, 10 split, which is by yelling out the 8's a cop, which made me laugh.
I still want to know what the little arrows on the floor mean and which one's the beer frame. Because our bowling league, I think every frame was the beer league frame.
I was about to say, well, the answer to the which frame is the beer frame, if you're bowling correctly, that's every frame. And don't forget to pregame.
You have to warm up, and you don't want to pull something.
Well, and it's really hard to bowl the first frame sober.
I found it hard to bowl any of the frames sober, quite frankly.
This is exactly why you guys are amateurs and not professionals. You need to call Jacques and get you a $25 lesson.
No.
It's a $40 value.
What I found interesting is I got freaking a sports injury bowling with a ball that was my size, and Marge is hefting around this ball that we can presume was Homer's weight, and she's just winging it around like it's a softball. So, damn, girl.
Well, she wasn't using the holes.
No,
either.
she was just like I said, like hefting it like a shot put or a softball. Just off it went.
You can always get that one.
So this is actually the portion of the show where I mentioned earlier we see Homer being a hell of a good father for Homer. I mean, it's like pizza and hoagies for dinner and stuff. We're not talking about getting a well-rounded diet, but to be fair, they were still using the food pyramid back then, and we've already learned that was all bullshit anyway. So this seems fine.
Well, the pizza is shaped like a triangle. I think you're okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But, Homer is actually attentive to the kids, attentive to Maggie, and we've got a couple of sequences where Marge is coming home very late when Homer is already in bed.
Which, for the record, the door that she enters in their bedroom is in the wrong spot. Like in the future seasons, the door is always on the other side, like on an adjacent wall.
Oh.
So like the angles are off on that. And at nighttime, Homer has this weird little curly chest hair.
He does. Yeah, he must start
it
waxing.
was bothering me for some reason.
Like, who is this dude?
Kelly Clarkson. So this is also where we get into a sequence, a little bit of a montage where it's showing Jacques and Marge spending a lot of time together at the bowling alley. And this is another sequence where I noticed some of the things were okay and some of them were pushing the lines. For instance, totally okay for your coach to hold your hand while he's helping you try on the new hand brace he got you. Not so much okay when he's holding your hand to help you dip an onion ring. Okay to have your coach guide your hands through a hand dryer to show you what you're supposed to do, not so much with the scoring pencil, and of course fine for a coach to position your hands on a bowling ball, not so much for him to try and position her hand on his balls.
Well, here's where you're wrong. Firstably, as a woman, I need a man to help me do everything because clearly I'm barely functioning.
Good point.
Yeah, okay, I like where you're heading here. You're changing my opinion.
You're projecting, you're expecting a lot from Marge, that clearly she's been married to Homer for however long. She's not that bright. She may literally need help to do these things. Maybe she doesn't know what you do with the onion ring after you dip it. Who knows?
Now would be a really time for me to mention, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any complaints about me being sexist or racist or any type of ist in the future, please direct all complaints to my complaint department ran by my lovely wife, Emily. That's Red's Riot with a 3 for the E. Please let her know just how much I've offended your poor little ears.
I will be happy to tell you my thoughts on your feedback.
and to be fair, I know we all know you're being sarcastic, but you think Marge would actually be more capable of doing these things because she's married to Homer. She should have already had to fend for herself in a lot of regards in this, so...
Maybe she's just enjoying being the Homer in a relationship for once. I'm just saying.
If the ball fits.
Yeah, basically.
There's definitely a little bit of role reversal here, and this isn't the first time that the Simpsons have toyed with that idea. I think they did it better this time. In the first episode, that they did this, I'm trying to think. They were at the party. It was the episode where they go to.
It was Blacksmithers episode.
Yeah, it was the Blacksmithers episode. It was also the episode where they go to the Simpsons work party and the kid and Marge kind of make ass out of Homer, which is very backwards from what we see. But I felt this episode did it better because they actually grounded the reasoning with Homer's big blunder in the beginning. I still think Marge pushed the boundaries of acceptable interaction with Jacques at certain points. But regardless of that, this led into Jacques pushing that a little further by saying, I don't want to just see you at the bowling alley. I would like to see you outside of the bowling alley. And then we got the line about brunch. You'll love it. It's not quite breakfast. It's not quite lunch, but it comes with a slice of cantaloupe at the end. And as somebody who's married to somebody who absolutely loves brunch, this really made me laugh.
You can't drink at breakfast, and drinking at lunch is sometimes sketchy, but no, you can get shit-faced at brunch, and it is totally classy.
Oh, yeah, the mimosa thing was really funny, too.
It's just he called it, or he said mimosa, and Marge says, please don't call me that. Mimosa.
So... the kids are not super active in this episode, but we do start to see some scenes between Bart and Lisa that they're both aware that Marge is acting a little bit strange. She's been doing extra stuff for their lunches, giving them extra treats, and they think it's a sign of guilt. Lisa's talking about the 8 steps of dealing with issues and the 8 steps of grief. And Bart is, not willing to accept that, but that's because Lisa claims he's still in denial, which I thought was a really funny scene. Lisa's concerned, and Bart just tells her, don't rock the boat, man. We're making out like bandits here, which made me laugh because I always love Bart.
El Barto.
El Barto, indeed.
I actually, Homer, Marge doesn't leave Homer in this, but not remembering the sequence of events in the episode, I thought it was really dark when Marge was giving them the overpacked lunches, because the conversation she had at that moment made it sound like she was gonna leave the family. I thought.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what happened? The fuck? Did I block this out?
Yeah.
Yeah, and while we're on that point too, they had a couple of scenes between Marge and Homer right around this time that they did for an animated show. They did such a good job of you could really feel the coldness and tension between them. There's a scene where Marge was making a peanut butter sandwich and it looked like Homer was about to hold her hand or something, and then he backed away, and then he started talking about how much he loves her peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
I think they purposely, I thought he was going to grab her hand too in that moment, but I think since Jacques was doing that so much, I think they purposely chose not to do it here to actually put a little bit of difference in there, because if Homer does it, I mean, that's going to evoke a response from Marge. So I thought it was really smart of them not to do that right there.
I do think they alluded to it, though, which I think builds to your point.
Yeah, and that's actually the note I put. It's Homer's redemption in this episode is that little speech he gives her about the jelly. It's so stupidly sweet where you're like, yeah, you screwed up, buddy, but I really feel bad
you
for
can
you.
Make a sandwich. All right. Good job, honey.
It's the character of Homer, and that's where he is.
I know. Actually,
you can only expect so much from the dude. I mean, he is Homer.
Well, I mean, he did feed his kids pizza one time.
That's
and hoagies.
Best parent ever.
Wednesday was hoagie night.
Actually, I was going to say it's somewhat on the same topic you're talking about, the scenes where Marge is coming in late. There's, I think, maybe it's the second time they show that, where she comes in and climbs into bed, and he's just like, hey, Marge, and she's like, she sits up and is ready to talk to him, and then it's never mind. So I don't see it as coldness. I see it as both of them a little too scared to reach out and have a conversation that needs to happen, versus anyone being cold.
I didn't mean coldness from either one of them, but I meant there was a tension.
You've been
between
on Team
the
Homer
two of them.
since this episode started. You've been Team Homer.
I swear to God, if I get a bowling ball with your name on it, I'm throwing it through your PlayStation.
Get her a bowling ball that says Homer.
That would be actually cool. Kind of fun. Yeah, I was gonna say she would like that as a gift.
Yeah.
You could probably get it Simpsons themed too.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think we all have enough bowling balls at this
point. I want to fucking clear my name real quick because I happen to think I'm a pretty good gift giver.
Firstably, that might be true.
I might be really terrible about waiting till the occasion that I'm supposed to, because I want to give people their gift early, as soon as I'm
on the way home from the store where you bought it from.
Dude, Christmas is so I like Christmas just fine, but it's so hard for me because I buy all my gifts on Black Friday typically, and then I just want to give them to people because I know it'll make them happy and shit, and I just like that.
Well, I do whatever. Because then the clutter's out of our living room, but I'm slightly.
See, I knew that's why you supported me giving gifts early.
Get the shit out of my house. Plus, your damn dog will eat it. It won't even be food and she'll eat it.
So there's a little bit of time for this speech to settle, and Marge has actually agreed to go to meet Jacques at his home, which she has this dream sequence at brunch, actually somewhat induced by our first appearance of Helen Lovejoy, who introduces herself as the gossipy wife of the preacher and notices that she was at brunch with a man other than her.
You know, some people are gossipy bitches and don't know. She's like, own it. I'm gonna do me.
And that's to 28 years later, she's still the exact same character.
Yeah. She speaks her truth, by God. She really does.
So she notices that Marge was at brunch with a man who wasn't their husband. They try to cover it up. Well, they do cover it up with the fact that he is their bowling coach. But you can tell that the tension that Marge is feeling at this point, the guilt, is really building up. And then Jacques pops a question of her coming out to his home. And he's fairly clear about his intentions here. He refers to her beauty and things of that nature. And Marge actually passes out and has a dream where she visits his home and they dance, and he talks about his awards for lovemaking.
Those aren't real trophies, guys. Just putting that out there. That's not a thing that exists.
You told me mine was real.
I tell you a lot of things.
Damn.
Right? I know.
Don't edit that out.
Today,
if it doesn't
man.
make it to the final cut, I'll be mad.
So I'm actually a little bit surprised here. I expected Marge to wake up from her dream and kind of just snap back into reality. And again, it's been a long time since I've seen this episode, so I legitimately thought this was going to happen. But she actually agrees to go. And that somewhat surprised me, just because I thought she was going to kind of like realize, like, no, I'm happy. And we get there. But first we get a scene where Homer is at lunch. We get our first appearance of Lenny, who notices Homer isn't eating and asks him if he's hungry, and Homer's like, I'm starving, but, you know, he's just not touching his sandwich because it's the last thing Marge touched and he didn't want to ruin it, or something of that nature. Meanwhile, Marge is on her way to meet Jacques, and, like, everything
From
that could
afternoon
possibly
delay.
remind her of a couple, of her relationship with her husband, pops up. Like, everything from, like, the animals running around to like the costumes in the costume shop being paired with their mate, and Marge finds herself at a literal crossroads.
A literal fork in the road.
Boom.
There you go. She can turn to the nuclear power plant where her husband works, or she can go off to Jacques' nice home and visit there.
I mean, how nice is it if it's right by the nuclear power plant?
It's got its own sign, so it's pretty
there.
spot on, I think.
Yeah.
It's got its own sign. It's got to be pretty fancy.
I saw a video a few episodes ago that explained that nuclear power is actually incredibly safe and environmentally friendly.
Oh.
Just like fracking.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Totally not having all kinds of earthquakes in Texas now.
So as we know from the fact that there's 28 years of The Simpsons, and the Simpsons kids don't have to go to different holidays, Marge does in fact choose to go meet Homer at the nuclear power plant, and they basically have a scene that is supposedly spoofing An Officer and a Gentleman, but I have to be honest, I haven't seen that movie. Have either of you?
Yeah, but it was so long ago that I recognize that scene because it's in clips of romantic movie montages, but...
Me too.
Yeah, I can't even remember.
So Homer carries Marge out in his arms, and there's a really fun, probably my favorite line of the entire show. The guys are yelling, like, what do we tell the boss? And Homer yells back, tell him I'm going to the back seat of my car with the woman I love, and I won't be back for 10 minutes.
You ain't gonna get a trophy that way, guys.
Well, I mean, I figured they'll do it like 3 or 4 times in 10
Yeah, but
minutes.
we've already established that
It's a speed round.
Marge stays with him, so she likes it just fine that way, I guess.
You can get a lot done that way. You're not committed to like a whole hour.
To be fair, in the amount of time the people at the power plant turned to applaud Homer, the gauge went from okay to danger. So I feel like 10 minutes for the safety officer might be about the max he can leave without causing an explosion.
Well, that's actually interesting, though, because when Marge comes across him at the power plant, he's not in his typical workstation that we're used to seeing him in later episodes. I don't know if this was just for the sake of this scene, or if he hadn't been promoted to whatchamacallit.
Interesting enough, he had been promoted. He was given his official job a couple of episodes prior, so I'm thinking that this was just, they hadn't really established what they labeled him as the safety supervisor. I don't think they necessarily established what his workstation and job
Whoa,
really
whoa, whoa,
looked
whoa, whoa.
like
You
yet,
don't know.
though.
Maybe Carl called in sick that day, and Homer had to go down and take care of that part of the job.
Yeah, he was having that voice transplant.
Yeah, no shit, right? Like, that really bothered me in the next episode. That's one of the first notes I wrote down. Their voices just sound awful.
Well, they're actually flip flops. The two actors, like just like the bullies from
Yeah.
the last episode with the telltale head. In this episode, they hadn't really established these characters yet, so the two voice actors actually flip flops for each other, and that's why they sound so off. I thought that was interesting. Emily, do you have anything else you'd like to talk about for the episode "Life in the Fast Lane"?
I guess other than the fact that Marge and Homer do love each other, they, like most couples or many couples, are guilty of taking each other for granted.
Hint, hint.
And it's nice to see them at the end where they remember, she likes a 10-minute man and he likes someone who can make him peanut butter and jelly the way he likes. So, the important things are still there.
What about you, Rich? Is there anything that you or your fancy little book there would like to add to this episode?
One of the things I missed, I'm reading off The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family. One of the things I missed is when Homer was parking at the mall, he parked in a spot that said, "Do not park here, no parking."
And runs and leaves the door open, I remember, too.
He does that with his car all the time.
Apparently it's a piece, or he lives in or Springfield's just a really like non-crime town.
But I also just wanted to shout out to what you did earlier about Albert Brooks. This is not the first time he's voiced a character on the show. The guy that did Jacques, he did Bob a few episodes ago, the car salesman at the RV place. And Albert Brooks.
That was a great character.
Albert Brooks jumps on the show numerous times to do a lot of great voices. He actually played Russ Cargill, the bad guy in the movie too. So like you can hear that guy's voice in your mind, and it's like so drastically different. So you got to give him major props because he always steps up to the plate, and most of the time hits a home run.
Hits a homer, you might say.
Two more things I'd like to point out real quick. I read these on the internet and thought they were interesting. As of the year 2000, Matt Groening himself listed this as his second favorite episode ever, behind only Bart the Daredevil, which I think that's pretty impressive.
Wow.
That it's such an early episode and it stands up to the creator's personal list. But and there may be reasons that we don't know of why this episode's so near and dear to his heart. But regardless, the fact that it made his number 2, I thought was pretty neat. And one other just kind of fun fact for you, in 2004, this was actually submitted as a fake letter to Dear Abby and almost made print until last minute one of the editors read it and realized he had seen that in one of the episodes of The Simpsons, and they pulled it and replaced it with a different letter right at the last minute. I thought that was kind of a cool story.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So that's going to do it for Life in the Fast Lane, but we still have Homer's Night Out, which aired on March 25th, 1990. Something interesting in the opening credits of this episode, this was the first time they added the thump when the skateboard hits the top of their car when Bart comes in, and also, more famously, Homer's scream when he almost gets hit by Marge coming into the driveway.
Women drivers, right?
Yeah, exactly, I'm telling you. We do get a traditional couch gag here where the sofa collapses when all the Simpsons get into it, and the chalkboard sequence is, "I will not call my teacher hotcakes." I would actually love to see a scene where we do see Bart call Mrs. Krabappel hotcakes. I think that'd be really
Unfortunately,
funny.
that won't ever happen now. Rest in peace.
Oh yeah, that's really
she
sad.
died last
You're right.
year.
I forgot about that. That is really sad. Man, we're getting to the age, or I'm a wrestling fan, and a lot of my favorite wrestlers as I was a kid are dying. But I think we're just getting to an age where a lot of celebrities in general that we loved as kids.
That lived through the 80s. Hard living,
Yeah,
am I right?
exactly. They're gonna start dropping like flies, and it's really heartbreaking, man. I mean, like, oh shit, who was it the other day? The guy that played Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder. Man, that's super sad because he was in a lot of really funny movies that I watched as a kid, and unfortunately, this is what happens when you get to your 30s, folks. Your friends just start dying, or your friends so much, your idols just start dying and shit.
One of my favorite lines all time is from Willy Wonka, and it's the one, not one that all the people talk about, but at the end when he's looking at Charlie and he says, "Do you know what happened to the man that got everything he ever wanted?" And he's like, "What?" And you think he's gonna say something kind of like, I don't know.
He died.
Yeah, but he just says he lived happily ever after, and I'm like, huh, short, sweet, to the point. And for some reason, that always calmed me down when I hear it.
Oh, that's kind of cool. I like that. moving back to The Simpsons, we already talked about it a little bit, but this is the first appearance of Carl. And as we already talked about, Carl and Lenny's voice actors swap here, so it does sound a little bit weird, but I feel like those characters, just like the rest of the supporting cast, and even the main family at this point, are still being ironed out, and they're not 100% established in the rules that they're going to take over as we get going. So, something interesting about this episode, but we'll do a brief recap here. Basically, Homer goes to a stag party, and they don't really call her a stripper, but they refer to her as a belly dancer, but she's very clearly a stripper, and she works in several strip clubs, we'll learn. But something that I found really interesting about this episode is the Fox censors really came down on the creators of the show on this one. The censors themselves had a problem with the stripper in the show, and they made her change it to a belly dancer, and a lot of that was caused by the fact that at this point the media was really starting to paint the picture that this show is subversive. A large part of the reason for that is that because Bart was one of the main protagonists, it was misidentified as a kid's show, which we've already established. It very much is not a kid's show. It's not as raunchy as South Park or even Futurama gets at times, but there's definitely jokes in the shows that are not meant for children, and a lot of the issues that the families deal with would absolutely go over a child's head. But because of the media backlash that was starting to happen over Bart's character and the Simpsons in general, the Fox censors really, really had a hard time with the stripper situation in this episode, and they really made them, they really forced the belly dancer issue on them. There was actually, I think, 50 or over 50 different drawings that they went through trying to find something acceptable for the
So they
censors.
had issue with that, but they didn't have an issue with the scale that has a big number 239 but no other numbers.
Yeah. And I think it's actually kind of interesting that Homer weighs the exact same 6 months later.
Good for him maintaining. That's kind of hard.
With all the shit he
Yeah, that's really tough with his lifestyle in particular.
When I was a kid, I was like, man, that's a lot of weight. Now I'm like, shit, I'm catching up to Homer.
Yeah, as I say, for like 2016 America, I don't think that 239 is a big enough number, frankly. I know more than like 3 or 4 people that are over that weight easy, like without even question. So I think that if they were trying to drive that point home in 1990, that might have been shocking, but I think in 2016, quite unfortunately, not so much. Regardless of all that, you spoke of being a kid, and there is a scene in this that very much reminded me of my childhood, and that is Bart scanning the back of his comic books for those terrible, shitty fucking ads that existed in every single one, but lo and behold, there is always one that you're just like, just maybe that would work. Like, I remember I had one once that I wanted to send in, and my dad basically called me a moron and was like, don't be a fucking idiot. But more or less, it was like, for $1, you could get instructions on how to make your own hovercraft, which, you know, as a big fan of Back to the Future, all I wanted in life was a hoverboard. That would have made my day, and to hang out with the Ninja Turtles. But the hoverboard would have got me at least part of the way there, and Bart has the similar situation.
I'm sorry, what point of this are you not still hoping for a hoverboard and to hang out with the Ninja Turtles?
Did you never have that
something?
science experiment that you did in middle school where they actually take you outside and show you can make your own hoverboard?
No.
It's called lots of drugs. That's how you hover.
I've done lots of drugs. That's never happened.
Well, you're doing it wrong then.
Oh, are you supposed to inhale? My bad. Go ahead, Rich.
It's just like this little circle that you can sit on, and it literally hovers like a few inches above the ground. Like, we did it in middle school.
Fun. I never did that. That's interesting.
Well, you should buy those dollar instructions.
Did you go to Hogwarts, Richie? Did you happen to go to school with Maggie Simpson? So the beginning of this episode, Bart's scanning through his comic book, and he's looking at all the lame items you can buy and calling them lame. And then he comes across the spy camera and is like, cool, man, I've got to have this. That's when we get our 6 month later jump in time, and Homer still has the same weight and the same problems as he did before.
Well, to throw it back, if you didn't notice, Bart took the money to buy the spy camera out of his piggy bank. Now, a few episodes ago, Homer tried to steal Bart's money out of his piggy bank for beer, but he decided not to. So if Homer had done that, Bart wouldn't have been able to buy a spy camera, and then this whole episode wouldn't have happened.
Also, the piggy bank was cracked when when Bart opened it, which presumably could be continuity from when Homer shattered it and taped it back together, like you mentioned.
It's all connected.
No, actually, I was going to comment on, in the earliest scene when Marge and Homer are in the bathroom getting ready, they're talking about going to this work party, or Homer has gone to this work party with his assistant and some girl in some other department who likes him. And Homer makes a comment to Marge is, "Oh, you better watch out. And you got to stay on your toes." And I'm just thinking, dude, too soon. She could have been with bowling, dude. Last episode, and here you are, 2:39, telling her she better watch out. I'm just like, all right, Homer.
I thought that was interesting too, that these episodes were put side by side with one another. Just I wonder if that was by plan as well, because they do have somewhat similar themes, not exactly the same.
I think it plays into Marge's angriness in this episode. That's one of the notes that I wrote down, why she gets so angry, because in the last episode I kind of took Marge's side for a lot of it. In this one, I'm all Homer on this one. Like, calm down, lady.
Interesting. Before we get there, let's go ahead and talk about the scene with the kids and the spy camera that kind of ties into this episode. But there was a really funny scene that I really liked where Bart, the doorbell rings and Bart's like, "Yay, it's the female lady," or I'm sorry, it's the female man, and Lisa corrects him that it's the female carrier.
I forgot about that.
I thought that was really funny. And then there's another scene where with Bart and the female man that
female carrier.
He's like, "Lady, where's my spy camera?" And she kind of loses her shit. Like, every day for the last 6 months, all you've done is ask me, "Where is my spy camera? Where is my spy camera? Where is my spy camera? Here's your damn spy camera." And he's just like, "Thanks a lot, man," and slams the door on her. I thought that was hilarious and very much Bart.
Yeah.
Well, then there was Homer upstairs getting ready too, where he is shaving and he's not shaving anything. He never shaves his stubble all the way off. But if you notice in that scene right before that, when Marge and him were talking,
dots all over his face, which are presumably stubble.
He shaves, and like literally as soon as he starts shaving, you can still see all the stubble, even the line outlining the stubble. He wasn't shaving anything.
Interesting. Maybe he's got a trainer razor so he doesn't cut himself. Marge swapped it out with one with no blades. So Homer has his bachelor party to go to that we mentioned earlier, and apparently, in just real unfortunate luck for Homer at least, Homer ends up dancing with the belly dancer, and at the same time Marge is taking the family out to dinner at the same restaurant where this party happens to be, and Bart with his fancy new spy camera manages to snap a clip of Homer dancing on a table with Princess Cashmere. So Bart has his picture and he develops it, and he at first is keeping it to himself, but then he gives a copy to Milhouse, and then within a quick montage of moments, the picture is all over Springfield, and Marge actually runs into it in a pretty funny way. She's at the gym working out with other ladies. They're laughing at a essentially meme that they made out of the picture where
Simpsons did it.
Simpsons did it, exactly. You're welcome, Internet. So the picture has the Homer with his belly sticking out, dancing next to the belly dancer, and it said something along the lines of, "Better watch out, ladies, swimsuit season's coming up."
So true.
You forgot to mention we got our second El Bardo signature too on the school before they went in there.
You're totally right, we did.
But yeah, this is where I started having issues with this particular episode, because yeah, Homer was dancing with the belly dancer, but outside of him stuffing a dollar bill in her G-string or whatever, it's not like this. The theme of today's show overall has been infidelity, but it's not like Homer's actually doing anything that's going to jeopardize his marriage.
I agree, except for one thing, and that I'm actually about to hear my wife either say how wrong or right I am, so this is interesting live right here. But I believe that there was no issue except for the fact that he lied about it. He didn't just openly admit that he was going to be at a party where there was going to be a stripper, and then even if it was post-fact, like, "Hey, I danced on a table with a stripper, but, nothing happened, we just danced." I personally think up to that point, as long as Homer had disclosed that information, he would have been in the clear.
I would agree with that. However, and that may have helped, but I imagine Marge is a very understanding wife. And to be essentially at this point publicly shamed over your entire town and be a laughingstock, where she's probably getting laughed at by being married to Homer all kinds of ways. I mean, Spider Pig, come on.
No, he's Harry Plopper now.
For this to be just not like thrown in her face of your husband lied to you, and literally everyone else knew about it before you did.
That makes a lot of that part makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense.
I think that's a really good point.
Women have pride too. We're just more passive aggressive, and he's gonna have like broken glass in his food or something. But yeah,
At least it's not arsenic.
this time.
But to be
If it had been a $5 bill, it'd be a whole different conversation.
but to be fair, she is married to Homer Simpson, party guy.
Ugh, lucky her.
But yeah, Rich, I did have the same thing written down, that I feel that Homer's offense was considerably less than Marge's actions from the prior episode. However, again, the fact that Homer lies, and as Emily pointed out, essentially is the result of Marge's public shaming, is where the offense really grabs hold.
Well, I still think her anger played in from the fact of what she was going through in the last episode as well. I think that, like, in real life, that would play over because her mind's going to wander. Like, if he's doing this and not telling me, what else is he not telling me about?
That's a good point.
And her situation in the last episode is hurt feelings related. I think she thought she had a friend in her nice, charming bowling instructor, and then that just sort of spun out of control. Because guess what? When dudes are nice to women, we don't want to bone you. We just think you're being nice, and then we find out, oh, you're a bunch of skeezy pervs. This is why we have no friends.
To be fair, you should never trust a dirty
true.
Frenchman, though.
It's true. Or some dude who looks like Wolverine, ladies.
So at this point now, Marge, as Emily pointed out, is kind of publicly shamed, but Homer is become somewhat of a public hero in Springfield.
Which is probably just going to make Marge even more upset because he's getting
Yeah.
pats on the back.
So Homer's going around town having a lot of people comment and shake and gyrate at him and doing all sorts of signs showing that they saw the picture with him and the belly dancer. And Homer's clueless until he gets home and is greeted with Marge with the picture asking, "What's the meaning of this?" To which Homer replies, "There is no meaning. Don't even try to find meaning in this." Which made me laugh as well. Also, Marge at this point basically kicks Homer out of the house and says he needs to find another place to sleep. Homer says, "Where should I sleep?" My suggestion would be the filth you created." To which Homer replies, would a motel be okay? What we do find is Homer makes his way to Moe's bar, where it happens to be ladies' night and all unescorted women drink free.
I was going to say, commenting on, Marge throws him out, slams the door in his face, and then the door opens and he's like, "Oh, you forgave me," and she's giving him his clothes and a box of tissues while she's like sobbing her little eyes out about how sad she is. So just the fact that it's not like she's just consumed with anger, she's like really hurt by this, and that precipitates him going and staying with his buddies at the bar. But I thought that was kind of an important scene where it's an emotional response. It's not just she's pissed off.
True, and yeah, I think she even told him, like, if you have any soul left at all, you're going to need these, because I know I will.
Burn!
Well, had she already brought up the point at this point where she's not just upset about what he did, but the fact that Bart is starting to idolize him?
No, we're just about to get there, and that's an interesting part of this episode, but we'll just say that Homer stays with Barney Gumble, who stays at an apartment complex that caters to his upscale young single lifestyle. Made me laugh as well. Homer eventually comes home to Marge, and Marge says to him while he's apologizing that he doesn't even know what he's sorry for. To which he replies, "Yes, I do. I'm hungry, my clothes are smelly, and I'm tired."
That was my favorite line. Just the timing.
That was also my favorite line. It is like just Homer being the buffoon that he is, the brilliant beast, if you want the callback from last episode.
But he still genuinely feels sorry, though. That's the thing. Like.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's that Homer's a bad person. I think it's that he's a pretty dumb person.
He's got a crayon in his brain. I mean, come on.
He's sorry, she's upset, guys.
Yeah, that means that he hurts because she hurts. Like, isn't that better than being sorry for what you actually did, almost?
No!
Well, it depends what you did. That's the point.
Lord.
Well, I do find it interesting here that Marge then tells him that the reason that she's most mad actually goes back to her feminist roots that we mentioned, where we do know from later episodes that Marge is a feminist in college, and she's upset because of the example that he gave his son, or their son, by objectifying women, and wants Homer to take Bart to meet this woman and show Bart that she's more than just an object, which I thought was, that's a valid. She's still true to herself as a character. I thought that was kind of fun.
Let me interject as a woman. Let me tell you what really happened. So, Homer's been, having to stay out of the house. Marge has been probably up late, nursing her hurt feelings about all the reasons Homer has done her wrong, and she can't really articulate, bitch, you shamed me in front of our town worse than you normally do. So she's like, how can I spin this so that there's a lesson to be learned? Because you hurt my feelings isn't good, but you set a bad example for our son who's kind of a dick anyway, so really, is this the worst example?
Yeah,
but
like the best thing to do is to not take Bart around to strip clubs.
Yeah.
This right here, ladies and gentlemen, why don't fuck with women? They are psychological
we
ninjas.
Will win.
Jesus Christ.
We will win every
Holy
time.
shit. Like,
because yeah.
I would have not come up with that idea in 1,000 fucking attempts. So
yeah.
Just don't fuck with
she might
women.
be upset about Bart, but no, that was grievance number 487 on the list. That was just maybe the last one she had in mind when he started telling her how sorry he was for being hungry and his clothes being smelly.
Homer does pretty much end up in a manner of somewhat public humiliation. Not really humiliation so much as he goes to track down this stripper / belly dancer to introduce Bart to her. He ends up on stage at a burlesque show. Then while he's mid-dancing with all the hot lady kick dancers or whatever they're called, he sees Bart and he realizes that he needs to set the record straight. So he gives a big, heartfelt public speech, and it just so happens that Marge has shown up and hears him talking about how they shouldn't objectify women because women are mothers and aunts and nieces and most importantly wives.
It took Homer and Bart 8 different strip clubs to find the right one, and it took Marge about 5 seconds, which goes to show you again that women are smarter than us.
Well, to be fair, there is the scene right before they went to that one where Homer calls Marge and says they're going to one more.
Oh, don't tell me
so
Marge didn't know where she worked already.
Fair enough.
They probably go to the same gym or something.
Yeah.
I really liked when they were going around the strip clubs, Bart kept trying to peep at the ladies.
That's what I was talking about. Marge should know better than to send Homer.
Yeah.
I just like that Marge referred to Princess Yasmin as an exotic belly person, because I don't know about you, but I heard my mom and my grandma both say that's what either one of them would have called an exotic dancer.
But your grandmother, who is by no means racist at all, she's one of the sweetest ladies ever, but she still refers to African Americans as colored people because she just is ignorant and doesn't know better.
Well, in her mind, that's not mean. She's like, well, they're color.
When she grew up, that's what was said.
Yeah, that was the less offensive term.
Yeah, she's not racist. She wouldn't say that other word. That's something terrible.
But she's really old and really sweet, and she absolutely loves everybody of any colored.
Yeah.
Or any color.
But especially the colors.
But especially, yeah. But one thing I want to point out
apologies to
about
Jesse
the
Jackson,
ending,
as usual.
I want to point out in this episode something that I thought was kind of fucked up. Dealing with Richie's theme, or the obvious theme of this episode, we should say, of infidelity with these two particular episodes. Homer has to give a heartfelt public speech for Marge to forgive him. Marge just has to show up at Homer's work and fuck him in the backseat of his car. What does that say about the genders?
That when your wife wants to have sex, you have sex.
I was going to say, if Marge had somehow publicly shamed Homer where it had ended up all over town, then she probably would have...
They would have had to have sex in public?
I guess so. The punishment's got to fit the crime.
To be fair, she technically did shame Homer because Helen Lovejoy caught her, and that means everyone in town knew about it, except Homer, who's oblivious to everything.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, but I think if it had blown up the way the picture did, they would have had to, reconcile the episode differently with Marge.
My theme about this goes back to what Emily said a little while ago, where you were talking about Bart and how, Marge just came up with the idea for Bart to go. This episode was about fathers and sons, and if you go back to the very first stag party they're at, there's a father and son, and the father's telling, this really great story about his son giving him his glove and everything, and Homer's laughing and making fun of him. But at the end of the episode, Homer has become that father where he's like, my son is the most important thing, and I have to take back all this fame I'm getting. I have to I wrote down the note, Homer has to sacrifice his son admiring him to teach the right lesson. And that's just the metaphor for the whole episode.
And that's why we call him the WizKid, ladies and gentlemen. That's brilliant, sir.
I also want to bring up one other point in this episode. This plays into later seasons. There is an episode, I think it's around season 6 to 8, where Marge tries to tear down the last burlesque shop in Springfield.
Oh, yeah.
I think
that
that it started right now. Homer got all these guys to get up and leave the burlesque show. And he was at, like a whole bunch of different places and probably having similar conversations. So I think this is the episode, and it's because of Marge that Homer is doing this. Marge inadvertently shut down all the other burlesque shows.
Put all
shops,
those
except
single
the last
moms
one.
out of work. Come on, Marge. I thought you were a feminist.
Exactly. So I thought that was an interesting little tie-in for, years down the road.
The ends justify the means.
That is interesting. Very interesting. All right, well, before we wrap up this episode, Emily, is there anything else you would like to say about Homer's Night Out?
I did want to comment that I thought it was funny that at the beginning he's going to the birthday party for the new guy who's his assistant, and 6 months later the new guy is his supervisor and marrying that girl. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that was really
Eugene
funny.
moves fast.
Richie, what about you or that fancy guidebook of yours?
The guidebook didn't mention a whole lot. It seemed to make a big deal of the fact that Marge was shaving with an electric razor under her arms. But
Oh yeah, one of the mini snapshots that Bart's spy camera grabbed.
yeah.
Well, just so you know, they do make electric razors for ladies, so it's not that weird. It's just
For your underarms?
and your
I-
legs
well,
and etc.
I was saying I don't know why they notated that though in the guidebook. And
Maybe just a woman shaving her underarms in general on a cartoon. I don't know.
this guidebook doesn't usually point things out just because of that. I guess they're just writing every random piece of crap down they could.
Was it like the beginning of electric razors?
Those have been around for a long time.
I just think the guidebook thought it was weird that she was using an electric razor under her arm instead of just doing a straight shave.
If she was still in it for revenge, she should have been using Homer's razor.
No, that's what you shave the dog with, and then like, here you go.
I was wondering how I got fleas.
You got to point out that copies were only 5 cents back then. You can't be too upset about that.
No, they were 10.
Well, it
They
depends.
were 10, I thought.
No, there is both actually. I know, and one of the dumb things I saw is they went to the more expensive place to make the giant stack of
Good
copies.
point.
Why would you not go to the place if it was a nickel?
Everyone's wrong. The guidebook pointed this out too. My library down the street, copies are I think 10 or 15 cents, but you can only put quarters in the machine, and the machine actually says 25 cents.
I don't think that we can assume that all copy machines and all libraries operate under the rules of the
Simpsons
specific
law.
one that you went
But
to.
I'm just saying, it's feasible that it only costs 5 cents, but they only accepted dimes in the machine.
Fair enough. It doesn't matter. Whatever it was, they were cheap as fuck back then, regardless. So anyway, I think that's gonna do it for this week's episode of the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Before we leave, though, Emily, is there anything that you'd like to plug this week?
Send your gripes about my anti-feminist and whatever miscellaneous hateful things I've said, comments to me at Red's Riot on the Twitter machine.
That's with a 3 for the E,
Yeah.
if you're looking her up.
R3DS Riot.
Awesome. Richie, what about you? Is there anything you'd like to plug this week?
Don't send me any hate mail, but I'll definitely read it. I'm on Twitter at thewiz_kid23, so you can reach me there. Also check out our weekly movie review show on Mr. Most Days Off's YouTube channel, so you can always catch us on there if you can't get enough of it.
Awesome, man. Before I get to my stuff, I would like to say, Emily, thank you so much for being on the show this week. I hope you had fun, and I hope you'll come back.
I'll think about it.
Well, I would like to say, just so that I don't
You mean
pull
come
a
back to
Homer-
the other room adjacent to the one you're in right now?
Yes, I'll come back to the living room.
Well, I would like to say, just so I don't pull a Homer, that I love you and appreciate you very much for everything you do for us. And I've had so much fun talking to you today about The Simpsons, so I really do look forward to this in the future. As for finding me, I am at Mr. Most Days Off on Twitter and YouTube and pretty much everywhere else. Also, come and check out my weekly review of Lucha Underground on voicesofwrestling.com. And other than that, we will see you next week for another episode of the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. We're going to do it a little bit differently, guys. We're actually going to do episode 11 and 13 next week. We're going to do the Crepes of Wrath, which is where Bart is an exchange student with a student from France. Really good episode. And we're also going to do Some Enchanted Evening, which is where Homer and Marge leave the kids with a questionable babysitter. We're doing this because we're going to have our finale the following week, and we're going to have just one episode, but we're going to do what was going to be the original season 1 finale, and that's Krusty Gets Busted, where we see probably the best episode of the season, where Krusty gets tried for armed robbery of the Quickie Mart. So next week, we're going to do the Crepes of Wrath and Some Enchanted Evening, and the following week, we'll be back for Krusty Gets Busted. We'll see you then.
And to all the married women out there, mimosa?
Yes, every time, always, Richie. I brunch you very much.